Africa is changing, and God has got the most incredible plan for Africa.
Today we are talking to Dane Simmons, who is been a friend now for a few years, I think, right? And Dane has a passion for worship, but he hasn't lived in Zimbabwe or Bulawayo his whole life. In fact, he came from South Africa, which is interesting because a lot of people from Zimbabwe are trying to go to South Africa. Yeah, you've moved from South Africa to Zimbabwe. Kind of describe the first sort of moments / few days in Bulawayo when you actually came to the country.
So at that point, I was moving from northern Mozambique, which is one of the most rural places I've been exposed to. And the feeling you get when you drive through Beitbridge and start to hit smooth roads, get into SA, and you feel like, whoa, like this is first world, baby, I'm here.
Sure.
I had that same feeling driving into Bulawayo, which just gives you kind of like the stark parallels between what real rural Africa is versus even the sort of urban thriving space in Bulawayo. But if I can compare my transition from South Africa to Bulawayo, people look at me a little bit crazy, like, so you have a South African passport? Yes. And so you're living in Zim? Yes. What's wrong with you? And my answer is, you have to look at how you define your standard of living. Because if you define it as something only attached to financial well-being, then yes, move to South Africa. But if you look at it from a perspective of community, the people you work with, safety, space, the ability to have opportunities that are bursting, whichever industry you choose, you can find incredible opportunity in every industry you look into. And if you're willing to put a little bit of hard work and diligence and probably a lot of prayer, because there's a lot of things we are up against in this country, you will see incredible joy and success in what you do. And you will find incredible people to do it with along the way. And so that's a really big difference coming from South Africa to here, is this incredible heart of the people that are here that just give you so much, a sense of love, a sense of protection, safety, community, joy. Ubuntu, I would say, is something that's much more lived here than in South Africa.
And when you thought about moving to Zimbabwe, obviously you followed a girl.
Yes.
Because I know the backstory, but when you moved to Zimbabwe, was that something that you thought you were moving to? Did you think you were moving to a powerful community, a Ubuntu style of living, or what did you actually anticipate?
I think the first decision, which was the reason we decided to stay or move back to Zim, for my wife's case, and for me move to Zim and Bulawayo particularly, was we felt the Lord was opening incredible doors and was saying, this is where I want you to be and this is what I have for you. And so there was a sense of calling into what's our role and our space and part in the kingdom and what are we going to play in that mix. And so we initially just took a step of faith. My wife said, I'm never going to move back to Zimbabwe for at least 15 years. And within 1 year, she was back in Zim with me. And so we took a step of faith. I didn't really know what I was getting into. And the exposure to this incredible culture became something that made me feel very much like I actually feel like I can relate more and feel more Zimbabwean in a lot of ways than I do South African. And so that was an unrevealing process that I experienced over a couple of years of living here.
Well, so it's interesting because you said that you followed, in some ways, the voice of God, and you followed his leading to say, this is where I want you. So in a world where you got so many people, young people, old people, that are making decisions based on like how beautiful a place is, or where I can make more money, or where I can get a better job, you just completely pushed that aside and said, God, where do you want us? Why was that your motive and not something else?
I think the most fulfilling and satisfying thing that I've discovered in this life is my pursuit with my relationship with Jesus. There has been nothing, and I've tried, there has been nothing more satisfying and fulfilling and purpose driving than the enjoyment of a friendship with Jesus. So I've tried the money route, I've tried the success and career route, I've tried various things, and they leave you more confused and empty than they did before. And they hold promises that they can't keep, which means they are actually lies. But following the uncertain road of pursuing this adventure in this life that Jesus calls us to is the most freeing and satisfying thing that I've been able to discover in this life. And it's beautiful, it's exciting, it makes power, money, girls, anything you find fulfillment and satisfaction in very, very secondary, compared to the enjoyment of a friendship with the creator of the universe.
Yeah, I get that completely, and it's not religion, it's not a formula, but it's a journey, right? And so you took this journey, you're in Bulawayo, and things haven't been easy. So maybe kind of a two-pronged question is, what did you find yourself doing where you really felt like, man, this is why I'm here, and I can feel it, I know it? And then let's start with that question, and then I have a follow-up question to that.
Yeah, so good. So my journey hasn't been a straight path, but it has been, I think, the right path. I felt God speaking to me to enter into full-time church, really influencing the church as a whole when I was 18 years old. It took 12 years for me to get into that full-time. I was doing various other things like studying accounting, which was a terrible life choice for me, working in accounting, business management, even agriculture, and dabbling into small-scale farming, connecting with small-scale farmers. And those were good learning curves. They were difficult journeys because you just didn't have your sweet spot of why God has put you on the earth, you know? And so Mark Twain says the most amazing quote. He says there's two important days in your life: the day you are born and the day you figure out why. And that why was answered for me when I turned 30 and God called me into church full-time. And the sense of fulfillment, purpose, vision, direction, satisfaction in that, even though the hard days have been a lot harder than before, it's just been a sense of the most joyful journey. And so I feel like the purpose that God has put inside, the uniqueness of purpose inside of everyone, is so important to get out. And thankfully for me, I've been able to discover that purpose and have it refined by the Lord in the beautiful city of Bulawayo.
Yeah. Well, it's not everyone finds that. I mean, I know people who are in their 50s, 60s still trying to figure that out. You found something that really makes you come alive. But you did say something about the hard days. So where do you feel like the hardest challenge has been in what you've done in Bulawayo, to maybe the point where you're like, this is pushing me to my edge?
So Zim, as beautiful as it is incredibly hard in a lot of ways to live here. And there is definitely a resilience in the people in Zim, which I think is a beautiful thing. But if our worldview is always chasing comfort and satisfaction, I think we're going to lose so much of what life is about. And I think a lot of, if you think about all of these great storytellers like Tolkien and all of these guys, they wrote the most incredible stories of adventures. And in those adventures, you had some of the most hardest hardships that the body and life and people can face and experience. And this principle of experiencing the deepest joy in those moments of hardships is right at the center of the Christian life and a lifestyle that's pursuing Jesus, is that the deepest spaces of joy are often felt and experienced not based on external circumstances, but based on who lives inside of you and who you know and who you connect with. And so I'd say my journey in Zim has been incredibly challenging. Some days we've had financial freedom, other days we've been living very much hand to mouth. And that's been an incredible blessing and a proof that God loves us more than anything. We've had moments where we've been like, Isha, we genuinely are fearing for our lives here. And we've had moments where it's just been dry and average and normal and mundane. And yet in all of those circumstances, if you can find a space to just get a little bit more of Christ out of that moment, I think you're winning in life. And so I think the most beautiful worldview is to be thankful for every season that God puts you in, whether it's the oasis or the desert. There is true freedom and blessing in that. And if we can get to a space with loving Jesus where we aren't shaped by external factors, I think we exactly where he wants us to be and winning in life.
And that is sometimes easier said than done.
Correct.
Because conceptually, it's like we should be all doing that. Can you take us back to a moment where you felt like you almost broke? Broke as a person, broke as a soul, and then saw the other side of, man, this is not my circumstance that defines this, but something different. Can you describe a moment like that?
That's really good. The story I don't share lightly, and I often wait for the Lord to prompt this story because it's very deep in my heart. And I think it summarizes beautifully the character and depth of who Jesus is. I remember a day I was grappling with a lot of mental challenges, like probably would have been diagnosed with like depression, anxiety, all of that stuff. I was separated from the people I loved, like so community was far removed. And I was in a space where I was failing in work, feeling so unfulfilled, so like, what is the point of life? And my biggest question in that space is, God, do you really love me? And can you really love me if this experience and situation is so hard? And God, this is actually too hard for me. I can't do this. You've got me wrong for someone else. I'm not this strong. Like you've misread me. This is too much for me, you know. And I dodged the office that day, and I was on my bed, just crying out to the Lord, physical tears as well.
This is in Bulawayo.
This was in Mozambique, and through tears, this golden light filled the room, and I saw Jesus walk through the door and come and sit on the edge of my bed. And I don't think I fully realized what was happening in the moment because I was so self-absorbed with my own issues and struggles and stuff like that. And I said to him, "How long, Lord? How long?" And his eyes filled with tears, and he looked at me and he said, "Not yet." And then I continued to cry, and the light slowly started to fade from the room. And I was then trying to figure out what just happened. And it was a moment that I look back on because it was more evidence of the love of God in a moment that was more hard and breaking than moments where things are going well and you feel connected with life on friends and people. And so that's probably just one story of many. I think we've had a lot of journeys along the way in Zim as well, where we feel like this is just too heavy, whether it's coming up against leadership in really tough spaces with the leadership in this country, or other spaces where you just feel quite confused and lost. The incredible space of God coming through and showing his faithfulness in all of those moments means this has got to be one of the best places to live on the planet, you know.
I think God's always got opportunities to make himself strong where we're weak. And Zim helps us with that.
Correct. Correct.
When you think of maybe, and thanks for sharing so openly, because I think many people feel like success is found, or your relationship with Jesus is determined by how successful you are on the outer appearance. But you're saying something a lot stronger than that, something that's core to you, something that's anchored to you. If you were to complete the statement, I am not leaving Bulawayo because, because there's something that's obviously unshaken in you aside from what goes on. So what would be your statement? I am not leaving Bulawayo because...
I am not leaving Bulawayo because the purposes that the Lord has for me to influence the church is worth every step of the journey. And I know with full conviction in my heart that when I get to heaven, I will hear the most beautiful words spoken over me, good and faithful servant. And there just can't be anything better than hearing those words and chasing and following in the footsteps and journey and path that Jesus has for you. And also, I'm just too terrified to be swallowed by a fish for 3 days. So there's no ways I'm running.
Yeah, I don't think anyone wants to be swallowed by a fish. It'd be hard in Zim because we don't have any oceans. But nonetheless, maybe a big bundu or a barbel.
It's very possible.
I think if you were to, what would you tell a 20-year-old who's maybe a teenager who's living in the city and wondering what the city holds for them? What would you tell a young person who's grown up here, lived here, about what they should be thinking, like what they should be doing?
The words from one of David's Psalms comes to mind. Never once have I seen the righteous forsaken. And I think if we have a context that David had, there's a protection in every aspect of life that God provides if we genuinely love and seek him. And I speak into that because I think a lot of people look into financial well-being, bodily well-being, like standard of living, like life in that space. And there's an incredible sense of like love and protection that we find in the Lord. I think I would also say that Africa is changing and God has got the most incredible plan for Africa. The world, the West, even South Africa is being influenced and exposed to some of the most evil worldviews that are corrupting people and stealing their ability to experience joy. And there's a sense of protection that Africa still has from those worldviews. And the other thing I'd be saying is God did the most beautiful thing in Europe where most people don't know this, but the church was actually the one who was leading the Industrial Revolution through the Reformation.
Yeah.
And so God came and changed the Dark Ages where it was so bad in Europe that people were willing to eat their own babies just to prevent their own starvation. That's how poor it was.
Reading that, yeah.
And I'm unaware of anywhere in Africa where it's that bad. And yet you've got this incredible move of God where the church stepped into its leadership position and drove society, whether it was in medicine or in education or in agriculture or in governance. You see this next generation of leaders stepping up into this role that God's called them to, and they changed society.
Yeah.
God unlocked ideas and creativity and fruitfulness and generosity and momentum that shifted the whole narrative of what Europe was to being a place where everyone wants to go and move to because it's so comfortable and beautiful.
Sure.
And that was birthed from the church. And God is speaking similar promises over Africa, that it's time for the church to arise and take its leadership into Africa and see this reformation of Africa from going to the dark continent to a place where it actually is providing for the rest of the world. Because there's food crises that is happening in the rest of the world, and the only place that can actually solve those problems
Is Africa.
That's just one example. We've got solutions to almost every single industry, and it's just waiting to be unlocked by what I would call the Joshua generation and not the Moses generation. The Joshua generations were the ones who chose to have faith in God and not to have faith in other things, worldly things, things that you can see, feel, and touch.
Yeah.
And they were the ones who went straight up into the face of giants and said, do you know my God?
Yeah.
Bring it on.
Yeah.
Bring it on, bro. Because you don't know my God. And so I think God is calling this next generation to be that giant fighting generation who sees the leadership capacity of the church into fruitful responses that address every single problem that society is facing in Africa at the moment.
So I mean, the way you speak, it's almost like you're painting a picture that underneath maybe the chaos and the stuff that we see day to day, that there's a rumbling of sort of energy and core people that are saying if they rise up and actually do what God's asked them to do, that we could see complete transformation. This Joshua generation that you say, where have you seen hope rising in Bulawayo? And I'm told that I have to say Bulawayo, but where do you see hope? Bulawayo. Where do you see hope rising in unexpected places in this city and in Matabeleland now?
I really love that question. And it does kind of share the fact that the 20-year-olds and younger really are in an incredible space to receive from God and also carry out God's plans and purposes for this country. I think God is going to do exceedingly abundantly above the reputation Zim used to have of being the breadbasket of Africa. And where I would answer that question is there's a sense of longing and hope from this next generation. I think they look back and see a lot of the mistakes that the previous generations have made, and every generation is going to have its issues, and so we're not here to say one generation is better than the other, but this generation is completely ready. You can tell by the way that you look in their eyes when you drive along the roads in the Metopist, quiet villages, and you walk past a 16-year-old and there's this sense of light and hope in their face. There's this sense of, we don't have the answers, but there's got to be more. We don't fully see it yet, but surely there's more for us in this life than what we've seen our forefathers fulfilling. Surely there's something better than poverty. And now that hope is often misguided and misdirected to think we have to move to South Africa or to the UK in order to find that thing. That hope is often attached to what money can do for you. And when that paradigm shift happens from financial security to more like recklessness in the pursuit of your relationship with Jesus, I think you find an unlocking of momentum, an unlocking of leadership capacity, an unlocking of a generation that can't actually be stopped and slowed down. It's reckless, it's fearless, it's bold, you can't stop it. And that must have been what Joshua's generation was like. To go and fight an army of giants where you say, the way that we're going to beat these guys is by walking around their walls and by blowing some trumpets, playing some instruments, putting our swords aside, and there's these massive giants in this fortified city, and they have the willingness to trust God that the way that he's going to deliver us is by
A little bit different.
shouting and walking around this fortified city. It's nonsensical.
And what does that look like today? Like, what is that nonsensical path of freedom that he's asked us as a Joshua generation to live out? It begs the question, if the kingdom of God were to come fully, presently, and expressed in this city, what would it look like? Like, describe it to me.
I think every individual has got to answer that for themselves. And it goes back to what we spoke about earlier on purpose, discovering why God has put you on the planet. But if I was to paint a picture, it's an army, a generation of people who cannot be sold into anything except for their passion and love for God. They can't be convinced that money is going to satisfy them. They can't be convinced that pursuing relationships is going to satisfy them. They can't be sold into power. They'll never make a decision based on those things. which is a big difference to what we see in our current leadership today, right? We can't be sold into what the world provides and offers as solutions. It's, I'm going to make decisions based on who my master really is. And my master isn't money. My master isn't power and control. It's Jesus, and he's got a different set of rules. His set of rules are based on a kingdom culture that the Lord tells us to pray gets earthed on earth as it is in heaven. And so you've got this generation that almost seem reckless and wild and crazy, and they're not. They're just following in the footsteps of their Lord with complete boldness and conviction, unable to be sold into anything except for their Savior. Completely free from sin, completely free from the life that they once lived, and completely sold out for this forgiveness of sins. And how can I not live the rest of my life in pursuit of this incredible God who I cannot understand, and yet I can know fully, deeply, intimately every day I live on this planet?
I love what you said, because you're not talking about an outward, necessarily just an outward expression. You're talking about transformation in people's hearts. And young, old, black, white, different generation coming from South Africa. I think it's interesting because you're not someone who chose to, someone who just by birth was here, by choice you're here. And I think that's a really powerful statement, that you're here by choice. And I think a lot of the people that are here by birth, from what I'm hearing from you, should probably shift the reason they're here because of birth to, I'm now here by choice. Things aren't just happening to me, but I'm showing up and I'm walking with him and I'm responding to what he's doing. And I think that's the picture you're painting. One last question maybe is, if you could say, my dream for Bulawayo would be, like, what would your dream be for the next generation? So this generation does what it's supposed to do, surrenders. What would your dream be for the city?
I think the church to be unlocked by young people who understand and realize that, firstly, you have a leadership space in church today. You don't have to get to 40 or 50 to have a space and a leadership role and a capacity and a voice. And so a freedom from that, even if people are trying to dampen what you are saying and what is in your heart, that's not what Jesus is saying. And he's the only one really who we should worry about in terms of opinion. Because he's the one who's going to say to us, what did you do with your life? Not our elders or our forefathers or the people who are supposedly in leadership positions. And so I'd say there's got to be a freedom in this next generation to step into their leadership capacity. And when I say the church, I'm not actually explaining or describing or picturing the Sunday service. I'm explaining the body of Christ on a kingdom mission that impacts and influences every sector of society. And that is where we see the kingdom unlocked and earthed on this planet. And so if I was to answer your question of what does it look like for Bulawayo, what does it look like for Matabele land, I would say a complete freedom in leadership, thriving in gifting, full of the Holy Spirit and full of life, operating with righteousness and love and integrity in whatever aspects of life and society God has called you to. Because you don't have to be a preacher to be influencing the church. You have to use what God has given you. What has God made your hands to do? Whether that's carpentry or fixing hearts or like, what is it? Selling chickens. Go and do that. And do it with a worldview shift, a paradigm shift, a change in perspective, in the fact that you have been called to be a leader. You have been called to influence your sphere of society. You have been called to bring the kingdom down and to change the set of cultural rules that are oppressive and bring a new set of rules down that actually bring freedom and light and life and change and influence. And that's where we see the reformation of Africa unearthed in a place like Bulawayo, the most unlikely of places, and you'll see the momentum of the church just can't be stopped.
When you're talking like this, I think it's something worth fighting for. And I think you're doing it in multiple spheres with church and young leaders. And I just think, not that maybe you do get thanked a lot, but thank you. Thank you for your role. Thank you for not backing down. Thank you for choosing Bulawayo when many people haven't chosen Bulawayo. And I think there is a call on the city. So thanks for sharing so openly and for just your sheer passion. I feel like there's a lot of young people that will watch and go, maybe I can also take that energy. Maybe I can also take that surrender. Maybe I can also take that action to the place that I find myself in. So thanks for being open. So appreciate you being here. And if you had one word to say to a young person, just one word, what would that be if they would take it home to make it part of who they are? Would it be faith? Would it be surrender? Would it be Jesus? What would be one word?
Now.
It's not late.
Don't wait. Do it now.